Good evening and welcome to the Eldritch Avenue podcast, documenting a lifetime of experiences with the ridiculous, the absurd, the unusual, the peculiar, and the sometimes unfathomable. I am your host, Joel Norman, sharing with you the many inexplicable happenings which have occurred to me over the course of my 57 years here on planet Earth. I will present my experiences of time spent on the eldritch frontiers in 3 waves. The first wave stories will be the easiest for you to digest. These stories are non-threatening, easy to comprehend, and readily placed in reality. The second wave stories, though readily placed in reality, will be difficult to listen to, and only the empathetic mind will get through them. The third wave stories will look at these things all sane persons edit out of their conscious lives as they carefully curate the content of their reality. These are the things your mind will be desperate for you to avoid. These stories open wide that which is named the eldritch, that being the otherworldly, that which is beyond. So I grew up in a small town in eastern Iowa. It was probably a total of 10 houses, and that's what constituted a town. It was really a village, and ultimately it was there because in the 1800s it was nothing more than a whistle stop, because that's where the train went through, and the train would stop there and deliver supplies to the general store and, a couple of other places. And there was a post office and a general store and a tavern and a few houses. It was a whistle stop. There was nothing else to it. There was nothing else there. But it's, tiny town, and that's where I grew up. And my best friend, I was very fortunate to have a best friend because there weren't many kids there. There was probably, I don't know, probably a dozen kids, maybe. There's probably more than that. Let me think. Yeah, there was probably 15 kids when all kids were present. Some were older, some were younger. Some of the houses in Massillon were, just elderly people. So, of course, they didn't have kids living there. So, anyway, in this small town, there really wasn't much to do. And when I was a little kid, really young, the only danger there was out there was, us getting hurt by doing something stupid. So when we were pretty young, our parents had to keep us away from the limestone cliffs along the river and the river itself, and to stay away from the highway. So the basics, and so, we were not allowed to go swimming in the river without supervision, and we couldn't ride our bikes, very far from home because we were pretty young. So one time, my best friend and I were watching this show on TV, and it was a children's film festival kind of show, and they had sort of European style films, which I loved because I loved everything European. And so in this one episode that played every Saturday, it was Saturday afternoon, and this one episode, this little boy and this little girl went running through this meadow of wildflowers, and it was beautiful, and they had so much fun, and they were laughing, and it was just dreamy. And so but then they ended up going over a waterfall and almost dying. But anyway, so after we saw that episode, my best friend decided that we needed to, go to a wildflower meadow and run through the wildflowers. And I'm like, okay, where's there a wildflower meadow like there is in that movie? She's like, well, there's one at my aunt and uncle's place, but they live way down that gravel road heading east towards Toronto. And it's, it's a long ways, and it's too far for us to ride our bikes, so we can't tell anybody, and we're going to do it anyway. So this was the way Donna operated. It's like, we're gonna do it anyway. We're gonna do what we want to do. We're gonna follow Donna Bird, because Donna Bird was all about adventure, and she always had a plan, and there was always an adventure to be had. And I just was like, okay, great. As long as it got me away from my dad and my brothers, I was cool with it, because I didn't like my dad and my brothers, and they didn't like me, and pretty much my childhood sucked. Because they were brutal, and they didn't like me, and they beat the shit out of me, and that's basically why I didn't like them, because they beat the shit out of me. So anyway, anytime I could spend with Donna away from them was great, even if it was, risking my life on one of her harebrained adventures. So we, just told our parents, well, we're just going to go ride our bikes in the timber. It's what we call the woods. It was like heavily wooded areas along the river. And the kids there in that region just called it the timber. Let's go to the timber. So, okay. So we're just going to go ride our bikes in the trails in the timber. And my parents, all the parents were like, that's cool, great, because you're not on the highway, And so they had no problem with that, because we could go fishing if we wanted to. We could ride our bikes in the woods if we wanted to. But even when Donna and I were pretty young, we weren't supposed to, be gone too long. So we took off, and of course told Donna's mom we were going to ride our bikes in the timber. And I told my mom that we were going to ride our bikes in the timber. And they're like, okay, be home by supper. So we rode our bikes back through the timber, and then cut across the trails at the back of the furthest portion of the private property we rode our bikes on. And at the end of that last trail, you came to a fence, an old rusty barbed wire fence, and there was a meadow. There was a pasture where Lloyd and Alice Hamdorf, I guess I should have said their name, cut. So at the end of that trail, there was a barbed wire fence, and there beyond the barbed wire fence was this pasture with cows and whatnot, but there was no bull in there at that time, so it wasn't dangerous. And so we ditched our bikes in the weeds so nobody would see them, and we crawled under this old barbed wire fence. Well, I guess we had to crawl through that one because we couldn't go over it. It was so rickety, and we couldn't go under it because there were so many thorns and stuff. So we had to carefully thread our way through the barbed wire fence, and then we had to crawl under the barbed wire fence, or under the electric fence, just past the barbed wire fence, because the barbed wire fence was crap, so they used the electric fence to keep the cows in the pasture. So we crawled carefully, military style, under the electric fence, until we got clear of it, and then we ran until we found the wildflower patch, this great big patch of wildflowers. And we just ran through it like in the movie, and we're like, whee, it was fun. And we ran, and we were laughing and screaming because we were young kids. I bet you we were maybe 10 or 11. And that's a little young to be, 5 miles from home running through the woods. But that's what we did. We did that a lot. Anyway, so we're running through the wildflowers, and it's a big, big pasture, and we get all the way through it, and we get to the end of the wildflower patch, and we're coming up to the electric fence on the other end of the pasture. And so we had to stop and catch our breath, and then the screaming started. And I was like, all of a sudden, Donna's screaming, and Donna was like, she was one of the bravest people I'd ever known. From a very young age on, Donna was like, not necessarily indestructible, but nothing scared her. Nothing fazed her. If she got hurt, she would laugh it off. And that always amazed me about her, because she would just laugh. She would bash her skin on a concrete step on their house, at the front of their house. I remember one time, and she's like laying there, and when you bash your shin, that's one of the worst kinds of pain, and it's bad. You can't take it hardly, And she starts laughing, and I knew she was in a lot of pain, and I'm just looking at her like, why are you laughing? And I didn't understand it then. I just thought she was insane. But I understand it now about how you can laugh away the pain. And she knew that when she was 11 years old, 10 years old. And that's amazing to me to this day, that her instinct was to laugh it off. And I didn't even get that. But anyway, Donna starts screaming, and it scared the crap out of me. And I'm like, oh my God, what's and I turn to look at her, and I look, and she is covered head to toe in those big, fat, yellow and black garden spiders. And it was just surreal. And I'm just like, where the hell did all the spiders come from? And why are they all over Donna? And she's just screaming and smacking them. Like, she's just smacking her chest and her stomach and her shoulders and her face with her hands, trying to get these spiders off of her. And she's just like losing her shit. Like, and rightly so, because, holy fuck. And then I looked down and noticed that I too was entirely covered in great big fat yellow and black garden spiders. And then I freaked out, and my mind fractured in that moment, and just was like, when you look down, when you're 10 or 11 and all of a sudden you discover you're covered in great big spiders, because if you think about it, those yellow and black garden spiders, those aren't little spiders. Those aren't the little spiders that make little cobwebs up in the corner in your mom's kitchen or in a house or whatever. These are like big, bulbous, spiny-legged spiders. They're like, 2 inches, at least. Those are big, creepy, brightly colored, alien-looking fucking spiders. And, pardon my language. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God. So I start, you want to brush them off, but you end up smacking them because you're like, kill the spider. It's spiders on me. Kill it, get it off, kill it. Well, you may not realize this, but spiders are actually quite fragile. And when you hit them, they're filled with lots of goo fluids, and they kind of pop a little bit. And what's inside of them smells really horrible. I don't know if you've ever squished a spider and smelled it, like especially one of those big bulbous ones with the big abdomen. But they smell horrible on the inside. They have like this really horrible, like astringent chemical smell, like some kind of horrible industrial, adhesive or something. Like, they smell really bad. It's like a really like unique smell. Like, you'll never forget. Like, the first time you smelled a stinky snake, like garter snakes or whatever, they kind of, I always thought that garter snakes stink. At least that's just what I thought. But there's certain smells in nature that are really, really difficult for your nose to process. Like a skunk. I think some people have smelled skunks before, and most people have, I guess, you would say. And that smell, it gets stuck in your nose. It's hard to get rid of. It's just like, it's really intense, and it's just, it's so pungent, and it gets stuck in your nose. And that's what the spider smell did. It was just horrible. The more you smacked it down, the more they popped. But there's so many on you, and there's webbing on you from all the, because what had happened is, there was one moment when I had gotten most of the spiders off of me, and I'm screaming. And Donna had, at this point, she had ran to go home. She had just forgot all about me, and she was like losing her shit and was just like, I got to go home. And I'm watching her running away, like running towards the fence. And I look and I see where we had just run through the meadow, because you could see the trails of where we had run through. And you look and you just saw a billion spider webs floating in the wildflowers. Now, how? Because we were like looking into the sun when we were running. So the sun was in our eyes, and I think that's why we didn't see the spiders. Because now looking back the other way, you could see every damn one of them. It's just like, because the light was on them, you could see them. But when the light was behind them, I don't know. I think that was part of it, because why we didn't see all those spiders to begin with, I don't know. If we just, we're kids, and just, you're a kid and you just tear headlong into everything you do and you don't look before you leap. And that's basically what we did. And so that moment of looking down and seeing your little kid chest and stomach with about 25 big hunkin' spiders on it, that's enough to fracture your little tiny consciousness. That's what I call psyche damage. Because it's just like, it's just the unimaginable has happened. The things that you only see in the movies has happened to you. A person covered in spiders, because that doesn't happen, right? Oh, but it does. It does. And you think that, like, no, it doesn't, but it does. Once in a blue moon, or for some of us, it happens regularly. Weird shit that doesn't happen. It does happen. And I just remember that smell of, and the spider guts now smushed all over my shirt, and trying to get all the spiders off of you, and Donna screaming. And I don't even remember if I was screaming or not. I don't even remember what my vocal reaction was. I mean, I think I yelped and screamed, because I must have screamed. I must have made some kind of like, whatever it was. Because it's like, you got to get the spiders off you, because you're 10 years old and you're covered in giant spiders. And those big yellow and black garden spiders are even bigger when you're a little kid, when you're 10 or 11. And I got to tell you, some part of me fractured. Some part of my mind fractured and disappeared that day. Some part of me died, or, as shamans would say, like, just left you. Some part of you just like, nope, can't do that. You just were sort of somewhat damaged from that moment on, because how could you not be? And in the end, I vaguely recall that part after the whole smashing the spiders and getting them off of me. It was sort of, I don't want to say it was in slow motion, but my mind wasn't working the way it normally did. And I remember Donna had ran the length of the pasture to get back to the bikes. And the bikes were at the corner of the property in the woods. And, I don't know, I decided I didn't want to walk in the pasture anymore because this is covered in spiders. So I crawled under the electric fence right there at that corner of the pasture, and went through the barbed wire and through the ditch. And I just walked in a daze until I got to my bike, and carried it and rode my bike home. And I don't know how Donna got home. I don't know any of that. I just remember I got home, and there was a rule in our house that my mom had set, that if you came home, if you went out and ended up getting like covered in mud or whatever, you took your clothes, you took your shoes off and your muddy clothes off at the back porch, and you left them there and didn't bring the mess in. And I just remember like taking off my shirt and taking off my shorts and my shoes and my socks. And I ran up to the bathroom and turned on the bathtub and I remember taking a bath and just being really quiet. That was it. But it was like 10 years old, covered in giant yellow and black garden spiders. And that's what happened. That was like the first experience I had of like that whole weirdness that can happen in life. And for me, it has happened a lot. Weirdness has just followed me. Those things that, people can't seem that, it's funny because there's so many people who go their whole lives without anything weird happening. Because I've worked retail for many, 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 many years, and customer service for many, many, many years, and international clientele, and met people from all around the world. And I've done some traveling and been in foreign countries, and been all across the United States and everything. And there are people out there who never have anything weird happen to them. Nothing. Like they're just, every day is just sort of like normal. We go to the store and then we go to work and then we come home and then we do this, and there's nothing weird. And I got to tell you, my podcast is all about all of the weird shit that's happened to me. Now, some of it's like the spider story. That's just a weird one-off, that it's obvious how it happened, and it's kind of funny now. In the moment, it was friggin' horrifying, and it was a meadow full of horror. And I got to tell you, when you're 10 years old and you're covered in giant yellow and black garden spiders, and you don't know how those giant yellow and black garden spiders got all over you, and your little mind just freaks out, that's the beginning of a breakdown, But that was the first. That was really the first story of first time I had something kind of wacky and weird happen like that. And there's been like a lot more. So in future podcasts, you're going to hear those stories. And I'm starting out with the simple ones. I'm starting out with the ones that you can actually digest, that you can accept and process and believe, because some of the stuff that's happened to me is, to this day, there are very few people who want to hear it because they don't want to believe it's true. And I feel like people need to hear it. Thank you for listening and for allowing me to walk with you down Eldritch Avenue.